Okay. I think we're ready. Welcome everyone here this beautiful afternoon where you could be doing anything but sitting in a theater. Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad you came because it'd be kind of boring here without you. So we're going to continue on. We're going to continue on with part 2. So that means there's a part 1. If you weren't here before, I highly recommend. I'm thinking that most everyone here has seen part 1. But if you haven't seen part 1, obviously part 2 builds on part 1. So for those viewing online, I highly recommend, because I might say some things today that you're going to say, well, where do you get that from? So you got to go back and 1. And I'm hoping you have some questions afterwards. I'm fully prepared if we have some time at the end to answer any questions. I do like not to answer questions as possible during the meeting because it kind of breaks up the sequence a little bit. And so we want to just roll as fast. I'm going to try and give you a whole bunch of information. And these meetings are going to be recorded. So if you want to have a second shot at it or a third or fourth or whatever, you'll be able to do that. They'll be online. You'll be able to access them. So that's not a problem. Everyone know that's been here for the first time, does everyone know where the washrooms are? Just out the back and take a left as soon as you go out the door there. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're ready. Let's have a word of prayer and ask for some guidance before we get into this. Father in heaven, we thank you again for your word. And Father, the spirit that inspired the holy men of old to think of these things and write them down, we ask for that same spirit. We claim that promise that Yeshua said that he would lead us and guide us into all truth and show us things to come. We claim that promise today, Father. In the name of Yeshua, we ask these things. Amen. Okay, so one of the things that I was focusing on is we had a discussion on the top of the Mount of Olives, and we know that story. And anyone that hasn't heard from last week, you most likely all know the story. Up on the top of the Mount of Olives, there was a discussion down in the temple. The disciples came to Yeshua and they said, hey, this is such a beautiful Ephesus, you know, it's going to stand forever. And then everyone walked up to the Mount of Olives, and I can just imagine the view up there of the temple. And he told them something. And we're going to just do a little tiny review to launch into these prophecies. So Yeshua said, do you not see all these things, talking about the temple now that they were talking about, standing forever. Surely I say to you, not one stone shall be left upon another that shall not be thrown down. So that's our starting point. And then the disciples just kind of went into shock, and they said on the Mount of Olives, tell us when these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age. So this is kind of where we stop and look at the verse, see what it says, see what they were asking. And if we're followers of the Messiah, then it's likely we're going to have the same questions. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm asking the same question today. 2,000 years later, somehow what he was talking about, I believe, applies directly to us. It didn't apply to them, but they were trying to make it apply to them and try and make some sense out of this. So he's asking them, what will be the sign of your coming? So that would be the second coming, because he had already come once. He was in the end of that sequence. And then he says, what's the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So the end of the age, something that we can look at, end of the world, end of the age. There's different ways to look at that. I look at it kind of the end of the age in a sequence of events. When Yeshua came the first time, what did he come to fulfill? Anybody? Let's hear it. Help me out. How about Passover? How about the Lamb of God? Sure, we all know that. So he's fulfilling festival typology. We can't miss that. And so we can expect at his second coming, he will fulfill festival typology. We don't want to lose sight of that. So that's got to do with the timing, and also the events of the end of this sequence, the second coming. First things first. You guys use that saying down here? First things first? If we don't get first things first or the first things first, it doesn't really matter what comes after that. So Yeshua said, instead of giving them all the signs, the first thing he says is, take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. We kind of labored on that. So we need to understand what that's talking about definitely. And if you're not sure, I would recommend that in the last presentation. So my point in all of that was to demonstrate that none of us have arrived on the other side of the maze. We need to understand that. As soon as we think we stand, what are we going to do? We're going to fall. Don't think you're there. The show is not over until, you know what? It's not over until it's over. So we've got to get to the other side. I don't know where you are in this maze, whether you think you're just ready to walk out the door and meet Yeshua. I'm not sure. But one thing I do know is we're in there. We're in there somewhere. And I just did a little sort of a fun thing this morning. I haven't done this before. I went through there and I know how to get through. So I'm ahead. So there we go. So remember that you're not out of the weeds yet. You're not out of the weeds. Yeshua says the first thing you've got to think about is deception. Before he said anything else, deception. So that tells us at the time of the end, at the time of the second coming, deception is going to be rampant. And what is deception? Is deception believing something you know is false? I would submit to you that all of you are deceived on some point of your understanding of the truth. Right now. Because the truth is actually supposed to displace error. We understand that, right? That's the purpose of the truth, to displace error. That's what light does. Light dispels the darkness. So while we're on this walk into all light and all truth, we can know that others don't have all the truth. But what else can we know? It's too basic to... Is that what? I heard something back here.
We don't.
Right. I don't have all truth. None of us have all truth. We're working towards all truth. We're searching, we're studying to find out all truth because we need all truth. Because we're told by our master that the truth will set you free. That's what we want, right? Freedom from the Romans. We want actually freedom from ourselves. From everything that binds us. That's where we want freedom the most. And so the truth will set us free. We need as much truth as we can get. And the reason why I bring that up is, if I know I don't have all truth, and I know that you don't have all truth, how can we work together? Doesn't it make it easier? Because now I'm should be walking in a bit of humility to know that, hey, I'm probably hanging on to stuff that's not true. So doesn't that inspire you or lead you to be more graceful with others that don't have all truth? That's the purpose of us knowing that we don't have all truth. None of us do. So let's be graceful with others as they're coming into a knowledge of all truth. So sign number 1, you remember the question, what is the sign of your coming and the end of the age? They wanted to know in advance of his coming. What sign? So he goes on to say, for nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilence, earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows, which I'm thinking you're all familiar with. What is that word, sorrow? Right. It's birth pains. Yeshua is actually looking down into the future. First, before we go there, let's just make sure we know what the first sign is. What is the first sign? War. War is the very first sign. War is what sends us over into the abyss of the time of the end, the protracted time of the end. War is what sends us in there. So that's what we want to be cognizant of. And it's not just any old war. There's been wars ever since that we've been alive, and certainly before that. But there's a specific war where we're going to be heading to on this. And it will be followed by famines, pestilence, earthquake. Has anybody watching the news, this little thing about what they got going over in China that's actually spreading all over the place? Lots of people die of disease all the time, but this one's spreading fast. I don't see any sign of it sort of disappearing. It seems, I think yesterday it was like 15,000 new cases, something like that. I wonder how many cases are not even known about yet. Yeah, this is where this is going. But this is actually nothing compared to where we're going. The magnitude of this war that's coming will bring famine, pestilence, and disease. This is a building upon as we go through here. This is a cause and effect. The war will be such a magnitude, it will cause famines and pestilence on its heels. And of course, we're going to throw in a few natural disasters to boot. And it says, this is the beginning of sorrows. We see in the book of Revelation that we see a woman standing on the sun. You guys, standing on the moon, clothed with the sun, 12 stars. You guys know that, right? That's the calendar. This woman is in possession of a calendar in the heavens. That's what this is talking about. But she's ready to be delivered. She's going to bring forth children. In the time of the end, the church, God's people, are going to be delivered. That's us. That's what it's talking about. If we stay in this thing, we will be delivered. But the time of trouble is to deliver us, is to force us out of the birth canal, if you will. This trouble is for us. It's for our purifying. It's to go through this time of trouble. This is not something that a woman should be scared of. Has anyone had children here? Any women out here? The first time you had a child, were you scared? Yes. Yeah, you were probably scared. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of pain and everything. But when you delivered, when you actually delivered, did you put a smile on your face? Yep. Yeah, you probably were still feeling pain, but you smiled, right? So through it all, as the contractions were sporadic, that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing sporadic contractions here, there, and the timing's not right. But once these things start coming, you know it's time to go to the hospital. Is that right? Sure, you know the time is to go to the hospital. And this is exactly what we see here. We are starting where the contractions are starting to come. This gospel, so it goes through a whole bunch of things. They're going to be persecuted and so on. I rather submit that the persecution that follows all of this is because those that are worshiping God have become the enemies. Did you get that? We can see, we're going to go into the book of Revelation chapter 13. We're going to see the mark of the beast and so on. It's those that stay faithful to our Father in heaven are the ones that are going to be persecuted. And it's because of their faithfulness. He said, you will be hated by all nations. Sometimes I wonder what happened to mainstream Christianity. Are they hated by all nations? They're going to be embraced. Apostate Christianity will be embraced by all nations. It's coming. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world to all nations, and then the end will come. This gospel is telling me that there's other gospels. Have you guys heard of 2 gospels, 3 gospels? Have you heard a few different variations of this? Did I hear a yes? Yes, absolutely. There are different variations. But according to Yeshua, it would be a certain gospel that would go out, and then the end would come. Why then? Because every living person before this is over is going to get a chance to accept the real gospel. That was the end of the story. Now Yeshua takes us back into the story. It's kind of like he gives us the whole thing, and then he says, okay, when you see this, and that's what he does here. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let him understand. Now let's not forget where he is. He's up on the Mount of Olives talking about the temple, saying not one stone will be left upon another. And then he says, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Now what holy place is he talking about? Context is everything. He's talking about a temple in Jerusalem. Now, this has led many people to believe that a lot of these prophecies, most of these prophecies have been filled in 70 AD. But I rather suspect the way the prophecies read is we may see another temple in the time of the end. I rather suspect that that's what's going to happen. Now, if we go to the book of Daniel, if we go to Daniel the prophet and find out all the places of the abomination of desolation, do you think that we might get a clue on some other details? Because the abomination of desolation is just one or two texts in those prophecies. So in my thinking, the question was asked, what is the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And he goes through and lays out a whole bunch of things. And then he says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation. So I'm going to find the abomination of desolation. So let's go find it, shall we? Daniel chapter 8 is the first place where it is noticeable that it shows up. Then I heard a holy one speaking. Another holy one said to the certain one that was speaking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily sacrifices and the transgression and desolation, the giving both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? And he said to me, for 2,300 days, the proper translation should be evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be cleansed. So here we're just looking at this. We're not going to look at this time period. But with this trampling, with this abomination that's going on, there is a time period attached to it. That's all the point that I want to make. So that's Daniel 8. We see the abomination of desolation. Then we go on to see in Daniel 11, we see it again. And forces shall be mustered by him. They shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifice and place there the abomination of desolation. So this is chapter 11. Now chapter 11 is right in the middle of the vision that Daniel had on the banks of the Hiddekel, or the Tigris. Chapter 10 starts that vision, and chapter 12 ends it. So we've got 3 chapters that are wrapped up in that one vision. So we've got Daniel 8 and Daniel 11 that contain the abomination of desolation. Now that tells me one thing for sure, is there's something about these prophecies that we need to understand. We need to understand if the whole prophecy is the time of the end, or part of a prophecy, or just the last couple verses. But they do pertain to the time of the end, according to Yeshua. We go on to chapter 12, which is the summation of not only the vision of chapter 11, about the whole book of Daniel. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation shut up, there should be 1,290 days. Now, we just want to stop at this verse just for a second and look at it for what it says. It says, from the time the daily is taken away, so there's an event, until the abomination of desolation set up, there will be 1,290 days. Now, does that make sense that those are actually bookends, the way this reads? This has been tried to be understood in the past. Some people have used it as bookends for what it reads. If we look at the Greek text, it actually seems to support that much better. Some put the abomination of desolation and the daily as one event, but it doesn't make sense really if you do that, because there's no starting point and there's just 2 things at the end. So it really leaves you hung out to dry a little bit. It makes way more sense. So we have a span of time, again, regarding the abomination of desolation. Have we seen a span of time regarding the abomination of desolation before? Yes. In chapter 8, it says 2,300 evenings and mornings. Both of these time periods are connected with this abomination and the daily being taken away. Okay, so let's look at these chapters now. We've gone from the words of Yeshua, talking about the time of the end. He says, go to Daniel and the abomination of desolation. So we hunt through the book of Daniel, find the abomination of desolation. Does that make sense, what we've just done? Have we done something that we shouldn't have done? Nobody's saying anything, so I'm going to assume you're with me. Okay. So, question. What do these chapters declare regarding the what and the when? The what is the abomination of desolation. If the abomination of desolation is something that the last generation has to look to know that his coming is very near, then you know what? But if that event is in the future, that's the question we have to ask. If that event, the abomination of desolation, is in the future, and the daily, the actual literal fulfillment of this is in the future, then we should be able to see in those prophecies where we are. We're definitely not after it, so we have to be before it. So those prophecies, those Daniel 8, Daniel 10 through 12, we should be able to find where we are in those prophecies. So the what and the when. Goes on to say in Daniel chapter 8, verse 16, where we started with Daniel, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Uli, and he said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So we have a being here, and we have another being. We know the name of one, we don't know the name of the other. Well, we're going to find out who this other was. And then he came near where I stood, and when he came near, I feared and fell on my face. And he said to me, understand, son of man, for the vision refers to the time of the end. Or another translation, this translation says, for the vision is for the time of the end. Now you can look at this up in different translations. Seems to indicate, even the language, the original language indicates that this vision of Daniel 8 is for the time of the end. That's what it seems to claim. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep and with my face to the ground, but he touched me and stood me upright. So Daniel gets this understanding that there's something about this vision for the time of the end, and he's thinking about it, as we would be thinking about it. And he says, look, again, same voice, says, Daniel, look, I'm making known to you what shall take place in the latter time, or last days. And this we're going to see come up again in Daniel chapter 10, same word, of the wrath. For at the appointed time the end shall be. Now we just got to, let's go back to Yeshua's. What is the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Same terminology. The reason why it's the same terminology is that Yeshua studied the book of Daniel. He could probably quote the whole book of Daniel, but he only cited 2 verses in the book of Daniel, just telling us to go back there. So the answer a second time to Daniel is that we've been shown the last days and the wrath, for at the appointed time the end shall be. An answer to Yeshua's question that he was asked. So he points us back. This is when Daniel is, at the appointed time of the end. Now this appointed time here, very interesting word, appointed time, is moed, and that's the same word that's used for festival. Well, if we learn any lessons of the past, we can know for sure, as he showed up at the temple on the 10th day of the first month, that's the day that the lambs were brought to Jerusalem. That's when he rode in on the donkey on that 10th day of the first month as the Lamb of God and the King of Israel. We know that at the same time the procession of lambs from Bethlehem were also coming in for the Passover. We know that. We know that he died exactly on time. Not only did he die at the time of the Passover sacrifice, as if that wasn't enough, it says in the Bible that he was crucified at the 9th hour, it says the 3rd hour, which is the 9th hour of the morning, the time of the morning sacrifice. And he gave up his ghost, it says, at the 9th hour, which would have been 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the time of the afternoon sacrifice. So this was all sanctuary types pointing to what and when. Now I'm suggesting that if we don't know the what and the when in the sanctuary times, we could very well be thrown off track, as they were of old. Is that making any sense to you? We need to understand these things much better than we do. And the vision of the evenings and mornings which was told is true. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. Now, many days, in the future part is added, and so is refers, and sometimes they just put things in to make sense out of it. In this case, it actually makes sense when we're talking about the vision says twice about the time of the end. This is just helping us see that very clearly. For it to many days, and that would have been the understanding of the verse. So that's 3 times in Daniel chapter 8, it tells us this vision's at the end. Okay, let's keep going here. So now we're going to jump up to Daniel 10. What does Daniel 10 through 12 tell us? Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the when? In the latter days, or the last days. Now this is starting to make sense to me why Yeshua said, you want to know what's going on at the last days? Go back to Daniel, because it's all in Daniel. For the vision refers to many days yet to come. Then it goes on in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4 and 5. It says, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood 2 others in visions, 2 other beings, besides the one that's speaking. And it says, one on this riverbank, one on the other riverbank. So now he's seeing some beings in vision. Now, you can't see that well, but you can see 2 different colored texts. Yeah. Can you? Okay, there is one in red. Can you tell which one is in red?
Yes.
The reason why I put it in as red is you've guessed it. Those are whose words? Those are Yeshua's words. When you go back to Daniel, this is Yeshua speaking to Daniel, and Daniel is told to shut it up. Now, when we go back to Matthew 24, this makes a lot more sense. Because it was Yeshua that met Daniel by the riverbank. And he told him this. So he knew what he was talking about. Then it goes on to say, and one said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, how long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? So now we've got another being here. So we've got one here, one here, one here. So they're having a little conversation. You ever done that with somebody? Have a little conversation with somebody and there's just somebody just watching and listening? Yeah, that's what we got going on here. The one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters. The one clothed in linen was above the waters. How long shall these wonders be? So we have this angelic being asking this being that's above. Well, we need to know who this is, and this is how we're going to find out. We're going to just do a little comparing. At the beginning of the vision, it says, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with the gold of Uphaz, his body was like beryl, and his face was like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words were like a multitude. Have you ever heard that somewhere before? Well, if you haven't, we're going to go straight to the source here. Revelation, and in the midst of the lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to his feet and girded about his chest with a golden band. His head was hair like wool, white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in the furnace, and the sound of his voice, or his voice as the sound of many waters. In the book of Revelation, we see waters used as a symbol for multitudes. So this is actually just nailing what it says in Daniel. So now we've got something very interesting in my mind. We've got Yeshua referencing his followers at the end to go back to Daniel. Now, when we do that and we actually read it carefully, we can see that it was Yeshua that met Daniel. He met him in Daniel chapter 8, and he met him in Daniel chapter 10 through 12. But that's not all, because we see him also in the fiery furnace. You guys are aware of that?
Yes.
He was in the fiery furnace. He was also when those people were thrown in. When he was in that furnace, Nebuchadnezzar said something very interesting. He says, I want the 3 guys to come out, but that 4th guy, we're not worried about him. That's not who he wanted to talk to. He was a little bit afraid of him. But we see him again, you remember in the court of Belteshazzar, and there was a bloodless hand on the wall, and he wrote, your weight in the balances and found wanting? That was judgment. That was our Father's and the Son's judgment on Babylon again. So we see, as we go through the book of Daniel, we can see Yeshua showing up all over the place. This should be no surprise that he shows up in the last chapter of the book of Daniel. It says, "Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river. He held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever. It shall be for a time, times, and half a time, and when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things will be finished." So now he's telling us that there's another time period. So we've got how many time periods so far? We've got a 2300 day time period, evenings and mornings. We've also got a 1290 day time period. And we also have, we're going to see this in a little while, we're going to see that there's another one. It's a 1260 day period. So we've got some timelines of the time of the end that are building for us. He goes on to say, "Although I heard, did not understand, then I said, my Lord, what shall the end of these things be?" Or these things. And he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end." Now that's a double whammy. That's kind of like this. It's closed up, and then there's a seal put on it. So what does that mean when the Son of God seals a book? What do you suppose that means?
Only he can unseal it.
Only he can unseal it. Do we see in the book of Revelation somewhere where John looks and he says, nobody could open the seals on this thing? And there was only one. Who was that? That was the one that sealed it. Daniel and Revelation, the book of Daniel and Revelation, has the same content, the same author, the same one that gave it. And we see that in the beginning of the book of Revelation, where it says that Elohim gave it to the Son, gave it to the angel, gave it to John, and John was supposed to distribute it. And this is exactly we see the angel Gabriel in the book of Daniel giving it to Daniel. So he would have got it from the Father, would have went to the Son gave it to Gabriel, which we see Gabriel's name coming up again, and then he gives it to Daniel, and at the end of time it's distributed to his people. Same story. Now when we compare Daniel and Revelations, is exactly what we're going to do through here. And we're going to demonstrate that the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation are actually one book. They tell the same story. They layer the stories, kind of like an encyclopedia. They layer those pages. You know, I liken it to the human body, how we had the bones and so on. You guys are all familiar with that. Exactly the same. The book of Daniel is written like that. The book of Revelation is written like that. All of these different prophecies giving a little more light on the same story. That's all it is. So unless we put all of these things together, we're not going to get a clear picture. Kind of like a scientific experiment. If you don't have all the data, there's a good chance your end result is going to be faulty. Goes on to say in chapter 12 of Daniel, "Many shall be purified." This is Yeshua talking now. "Many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." These are Yeshua's words. Now, do you remember that there was a parable in chapter 25, I believe, about some wise people and not so wise people? I wonder somehow if he's referring to this. Because wasn't that parable about the ones that are waiting for his coming? And just before that, a chapter, he talked about going to the book of Daniel. All this is time. It's all part of the timing of the greatest teacher. So he unpacks this thing, and in the book of Daniel it says the wise are going to understand this. This is why actually, that we titled this book, The Wise Shall Understand. What? Daniel and Revelation. That's kind of a catchy title right out of Scripture, because we believe, as a ministry, that the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation have real importance for the days that we're living in. And I don't think we're grabbing that just out of thin air. It seems like if we're following Yeshua, if we're actually, who claims here to be following Yeshua? Wouldn't it be smart for us to listen to him? I think so. So this is our primary focus. Now, I talk to people all the time. Well, no, you know what? I talked to him about Daniel. He says, you know, I've never really studied Daniel. But they can almost quote a lot of verses out of everywhere else, but they can't quote out of Daniel. And then you ask them about Revelation. Well, no, I don't really study Revelation. My goodness. The master teacher said, go to Daniel. Once we get Daniel sorted out, then we might want to explore other ponds. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it certainly does to me. Daniel 12 verse 1, same thing. Yeshua is speaking here. From the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation set up. This is the same timing, same events as in Daniel chapter 8. Set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Then he says, blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. So we've got a fourth time period now. But go your way till the end, for you shall rest and arise to your inheritance at the end of days. Now, could someone please tell me what day people are going to rise on? You can give me the specific day if you want. Would it have anything to do with sanctuary time? You see, all the main events, all of them, all the main events of this plan that God has, all the main events happen exactly on time. I've heard it said that his timing knows no haste or delay. He shows up exactly on time. All the way through these prophecies, it occurred to me one day, is it possible that if the festival calendar is a prophecy, which we understand it is, the festival calendar is a prophecy for the plan of salvation, from the beginning of it, from the land slain from the foundation of the world, till the recreation of this world at the end of the millennium. And everything between, the whole festival calendar is laid out in there. Everything. There isn't any great event in the plan of salvation that is not in there. Now, if I can find these great events in history or in prophecy, if I can look through the prophecies and see a whole bunch of things happen, if that's also a prophecy, a revelation of what's coming, I should be able to blend the prophetic calendar with the prophetic books. Does that make sense? So that now when I'm reading the book of Daniel, I should be able to say, that's the Day of Atonement. That's the Feast of Trumpets. That's the resurrection. Are you with me? We should be able to do that. And we can also do that in the book of Revelation. Here's an example. We see the temple of the tabernacle opened in heaven. Now, let me ask you, what day does the temple open? The innermost sanctuary, when does that open? Day of Atonement. So I can look in the book of Revelation and find when it's open, and I know that event, what it's talking about, happens on the Day of Atonement. And it just so happens that the 7 last plagues are poured out on the Day of Atonement. Now that makes sense because that's judgment. That's Judgment Day. And that's where they're poured out. So as we start to get familiar with this festival calendar, we can read it right into the prophecies. Goes on in Matthew. Let's go back to Matthew now. So we've looked at Daniel. We've seen, okay, Daniel itself says that this is for the time of the end. Yeshua says it's for the time of the end. Yeshua was in the book of Daniel declaring the same thing. He says, then let those that are in Judea, come back to what he was saying on the Mount of Olives here. He says, flee to the mountains and let him who's on the housetop not go down, take anything out of the house. This is kind of an emergency situation. The house is on fire, just get out. Forget about the pictures, nothing. Don't go back for anything. Let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes, but woe to those who are pregnant in those days and are nursing babies in those days. Goes on to say, and pray that your flight be not in the winter or on the Sabbath. For then there shall be great tribulation, such as not since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. Now, I don't know about you, but if you accumulated all the bad things that ever happened in this world and tried to make some kind of a picture, apparently, according to Yeshua, it wouldn't equal this. That's what he says. This is going to be a time of trouble. Proverbs tells us when a wise man sees trouble coming, he does what? He hides himself, right? These are all warnings to us. And what he's saying here is if you don't take the warning, guess what? You're going to flee at the last moment in time. You're not even going to be able to get your coat. That's how much of an emergency. So what we're trying to tell people is, hey, you might want to get out of town. You might want to put that in your future plans, is not to be by large populations. It just might be a good idea if this is all going to happen. And I believe that's the warning. Because when we look back in history, what happened in Sodom? What happened in Gomorrah? We can see that these places of wickedness, which are compared to our time, were destroyed. And Abraham found refuge where? In the hills, right? But his buddy Lot, his nephew Lot, waited until the last moment of time, and actually was yanked out of the city by angels. He found a nice place to live. Where was it? Anyone guess? It was in a cave. Yeah, somehow I think that Abraham had this thing figured out, is to get to a place of safety. Goes on in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, where Yeshua is quoting now. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. There shall be a time of trouble, such as there never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time, your people shall be delivered. That's the birth pains. Same thing. He's talking about the same thing. So he's going back and telling them that these are the beginning of sorrows when his people will be delivered. It's all through the context of Revelation as well. Everyone that is written in the book, you want to make sure that book has your name on it. Absolutely. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. Do not be deceived. So this is the fourth time he's talking about deception. Don't believe this thing. Through the prophecy of Matthew 24, he says false prophets will come and deceive many. And ultimately, at the end, there will be a false Christ. And we know who that's going to be, and that is the abomination of desolation. That's what we need to be aware of. So I just want to stop at verse 22. Unless those days be shortened, no flesh would be saved. Now, when we understand that the wicked will be destroyed, and we're going to see other places that will indicate that, Yeshua's really not coming back for the wicked. He's coming back for his own. And what he's trying to say here is if I don't get back soon, even the righteous will be destroyed. Because this world is, as it were, going to implode or self-destruct. He says, I will destroy those who, what? Destroyed the earth. When we look at the book of Revelation, when we read it not even carefully, when we read through that, this planet is going to go under tremendous stress. Tremendous stress. Asteroids, everything. Going to bring on destruction. It says, now learn the parable of the fig tree. When the branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it's near at the very doors. Now, question. Did the disciples see all these things that we're talking about? It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like they saw all these things. Actually, Peter helps us out on that. It says the prophets that went before us, they weren't ministering to their own. They were ministering to us. on who these things were going to fulfilled at the end of time. So we can know when we see the events in these prophecies start to begin to come to pass, we're going to know that we've arrived. And we need to know. We absolutely need to know. Matthew 24 says, "Assuredly I say to you that this generation, the generation that sees these things, will by no means pass away till all these things take place." So the whole sequence of events. So now here's the question. The disciples asked, what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age? The first thing was war, famines, pestilence. So when we see these things taking place, we can know. So we need to know the right war that's going to happen, which we're going to find that out as well. Goes on to say, but of that hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but the Father only. So that's in Matthew. But let's look what Mark says. But of the day and the hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. Now somehow in my finite brain, I thought that Yeshua knew everything. Have you guys ever thought that? Well, either he was lying here, or he actually didn't know. Does that make sense? He's not telling them something that isn't true. So for whatever reason, Yeshua didn't know. And it was probably in his best interest that he didn't know. The disciples didn't know. He didn't know. He said the angels don't know. Only the Father knows. And he did not have that information. So he says, I don't know. Nobody knows. Well, here's my question, where my mind goes. Is there likely a time in the future, or even now, that the Son knows the day and the hour? Is it possible that he might know a day in advance of the day and the hour when he's going to return? Or 2 days, or 3 days, or 4 days? When we see the book of Revelation, we understand that our great high priest has gone into the heavens to minister and to carry out the judgment which we see in Revelation. We know that he knows how long he has after that. So we know for sure that in advance he's going to know the day and the hour. And that would sort of seem to indicate then the angels would know the day and the hour. Now, is it possible that with his words he says nobody knows 2,000 years ago, but 2,000 years later it may be that they know? Now, if that's possible, is it possible that man could know in advance? The answer to that question has to be yes. It's the only reasonable answer you can make. And I would submit to you that knowing the festival calendar, the typology, knowing what it is, and knowing the prophecies will give us an indication of the day and the hour. You follow that? That's exactly the way it is. Because he does not want us to be taken unawares. We know that. Well, the only way you can know is you know what time the thief is coming. You know, and you will guard the house if you know. Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, saying, Lord, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom of Israel? That's the question we're asking today. It hasn't happened yet. 2,000 years later, we're asking the same question. What does he say? Therefore, when they had come together, they asked him, Lord, will you at this time restore the kingdom of Israel? And he said to them, it is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father has put under his own authority. This same thing. We can take this back to Daniel chapter 9. At the appointed time, at the festival, at the appointed time of deliverance. This word seasons here is the Greek word. It's equivalent to moed. So he's saying, he's talking about appointed times as well. But as the days of Noah were, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. And so often we think of this, but we don't really explore it. What is this talking about? Is this just talking about wickedness in the world, or is this talking about something else? Well, let's go on and see. For as the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah came and entered the ark. In other words, it was like business as usual. They're just scrambling around, doing what they were doing. They were eating and drinking. And I would think I would throw in, if I was writing this today, I would say partying, licentiousness. I mean, we'd have a whole boatload of stuff to throw in there. Would you agree with that? Sure. There's more stuff going on. This is just kind of a envelope of what we're going. So he says they were doing all this stuff, whatever they were doing, until the ark came, and Noah entered the ark. He was sealed into the ark. We know that. And it goes, and those people that didn't get in the ark, and they did not know until the flood came and took them all away, also so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, if we take this back to the parable of the wise and the foolish, the parable of the wise and foolish tell us something, is that the unwise virgins did not have enough oil in their lamps to light the way. And they fell asleep. But those that had enough light in their lamp were able to see. And they kept their eyes open. And I'm just wondering, it says there that they all slept and slumbered. I sure pray that some people have their eyelids propped open with some toothpicks in there to stay awake. And this is what we need to do. We need to stay awake in this thing and don't fall asleep and be taken unawares. Okay, so now we're going to go into the heart of Daniel first, and then we'll get into Revelation. But we're not going to get too much into Revelation tonight. We're going to first get into Daniel and cover that. We've already talked about a mistake that they made at the first coming. One of the mistakes that they made at the first coming is his own people. Do you guys claim to be of his people out here? I think you are. That's why you're here. You're wanting to be part of his people. So you guys are claiming to be part of his people. Some of you are coming to awaken the idea of the prophetic calendar, the Passover and so on, and how those could play into end time events. You're aware of that. Now, if we can learn a lesson of the first coming, they were all reading the wrong prophecies, and they had the festival calendar turned up on its head, and they didn't recognize the Lamb of God that was slain from the foundation of the world. Are you with me? You need to grasp that concept, because what we've learned from history is that we don't learn from history. So if you think you're looking at the right prophecies, that's wonderful, but you need to know that you're looking at the right prophecies. If you think you have the prophetic calendar figured out, that's great, but you need to know that you have it figured out. That's what the problem was at the first coming. Did you get that? I know you got that. That's good. I cannot overstate that because it is so important. It goes back to the Yeshua saying, don't be deceived, because a falsehood is actually calculated to take you down a road that you actually don't want to go down. That's what being deceived is. You know that. Being deceived is believing something with all of your heart that you think is true, but it's not. We need to challenge our minds as to what is truth. So the second coming, we've got to learn that lesson of the past. We've got to study the prophecies. I like to say we've got to start where Yeshua started us. And we've got to know the festival calendar, how it plays out in the time of the end. And then we will not, I believe, be deceived. So let's go to the war and the rumors of wars. In Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 10, we see those two prophecies where the abomination, the desolation was. Well, guess what? At the beginning of those two prophecies, they start with war. That's a good place to start, isn't it? So that's where we're going to start. So the time of the end, which is what those prophecies teach, that's what we saw when Yeshua said, you guys want to know at the time of the end? Go to Daniel. Daniel itself tells us it's the time of the end. Yeshua spoke those words about the time of the end. And we see in Daniel chapter 8, we see a ram and a goat do battle. Now I know in history This prophecy has been applied in times past. But a careful read, and I will say a careful read, will demonstrate that not every specification has been met. Now, what people don't really grasp is the idea is that prophetic writings, prophecies, are not just ink on paper. They don't just put stuff in to fill it. You know, sometimes if a person's writing a book, we just need a little more substance in there, we'll add something. There's nothing in here that's added. In fact, Daniel was told in Daniel chapter 7 that he wrote down the main facts. Wow, I'd like to have all the facts. He's just giving us the main facts. All these prophecies are just the main facts. That's why when we gather all the prophecy writings together, we can see that we have all the facts when we do that. And that's why we have to gather all the information. So we have a war in Daniel chapter 8 that begins with the kings of Media and Persia. I submit to you that the ram, the kings of Media and Persia, is a greater envelope, and it's actually Islam as a whole that's controlled by the kings of Media and Persia, and we're going to see who they are. That one's pretty easy, and the United Nations. So this goat power is represented as the United Nations, and the Grecia, the power of Grecia that's talking about. And somebody might say, "Oh no, that's just hang on. We're gonna get there." Daniel chapter 10 tells us. So this is the next prophecy. Tells us, just to solidify this a little bit about the war, starting in Daniel chapter 10 through 12. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belshazzar. And the thing was true, and a great conflict. Now, if you got a pen and paper, just write that verse down, Daniel 10, verse 1, and you're going to try and find that in your Bible, and it's likely you won't find this the way it reads. It says that the appointed time was long, and here it says a great conflict. But the Hebrew words demonstrate that the appointed time was for a great vision at the end of time. That's what it's talking about. And you can look in the words and see the actual meaning. When I did this, I thought, how did the translators do this? It's not the first time the translators made a mistake. Sometimes we've got to do a little extra homework to when we start to fine-tune the details. I tell people, well, I think you can find salvation in a lot of Bibles. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty details, sometimes a concordance would come in handy. Would you agree with that? Sometimes we need to pull it out and see what it's saying. This war with the kings of Media and Persia is actually going to be a showdown. It's going to be a showdown with the sons of Abraham. Now, who are the sons of Abraham? We know who this is. Abraham had a son. One of his sons was... I'm hearing Ishmael. Ishmael was his firstborn, right? That's a trick question. That's a trick statement. According to our father, Ishmael was not his firstborn. Isaac was. Now, that doesn't make sense, does it? I think that's pretty cool because things that we do in sin are actually not counted against us. Is that good news? Oh my, that's good news. Sure. So the sons of Isaac, or the sons of Abraham, are Ishmael, Isaac, and Yeshua. If you are Yeshua's, you're Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise, right? So this is a showdown between the sons of Abraham. That's what we have coming. That's the war that Yeshua was talking about. And we saw this war carried out. It was called the Crusades. You guys are familiar with some history of the Crusades? It went on for hundreds of years. It was the Christians against the Muslims. Well, that's not over yet. That war is still raging, and it's going to come to a head before we know it. The largest Trojan horse that was ever put in place is being put in place today. Absolutely. I had to just do a little homework that we have 1.5 billion strong Muslims, and their conception of the end game for them is to rule the world. Exactly the same thing the Christians are. Exactly the same. They have the same kind of mandate. The Christians believe that Yeshua will rule the world. the Muslims believe Allah will rule the world. And they both have different ways to get there, but the important thing is they both believe in their ways to get there. And that's when it becomes dangerous. Trojan horse. It's a plural noun. Trojan horse is a hollow wooden statue of a horse in which the Greeks concealed themselves in order to enter Troy. Very interesting. So, if this is a Trojan horse, have the Islamic nations entered the world, as it were? Absolutely. Absolutely. A person or thing intended secretly to undermine or bring about the downfall of an enemy or an opponent. The rebels may use this peace accord as a Trojan horse to try to take over. This is exactly what we have going on here. You can take the pendulum of Islam and the pendulum of Christianity and put them side by side, and they both swing the same distance. You have the radicals on one side and the liberals on the other. But one thing in Christianity, for anyone that's actually in it, they do believe that Yeshua will come back to reign. Whether they want to call him Jesus or Yeshua, they think he's coming back. As far as Islam is concerned, it's the same thing. They believe, whether they're liberal or whether at the other end, they believe that Allah will reign. Well, we've heard that Islam is a peaceful religion. Have you ever heard that? Absolutely is. There are a lot of people that are peaceful in Islam. They don't want to hurt you. None of that. But in the Quran, they have a mandate. And when the trigger is pulled, it will go. That's just the way it is. But those that are on the peaceful end of things, they are going to enter peacefully and infiltrate governments. Now, we just had a thing happen in Canada that was brought to my attention just a couple of weeks ago. We have an immigration minister there. That would be the top guy that's in charge of immigration. And he's a Muslim. Now, I know that doesn't bother you, but because I live there, it kind of bothers me a little bit. Now, I'm not prejudiced. Our Father loves all people. This is not about people. This is about ideologies. It's about truth and error. And it's what people will do to bring their ideologies to pass. I understand that Colonel Gaddafi, before he died, he decided he wasn't going to be a terrorist and inflict damage everywhere he wanted to. He came to the place where Islam was going to take over the world by population alone. When the stats are examined with Islam and Caucasian, Islam is outpopulating the planet faster, much, much faster, 3, 4, 5 times faster than the Western world is. And in fact, in Germany, why they have done what they've done is because of the population decline in Europe. So they have brought all these people in so that they will have people to work. That makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense if you don't understand what's going on. It actually makes economic sense, and of course that's the downfall. It's about money. So then we go on in Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. Let's go through this prophecy a little bit and see what it says. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, even to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me the first time. So the first vision of Daniel was Daniel chapter what? Daniel chapter 2? Yeah, but it's interesting that Daniel chapter 2 was not Daniel's vision. It was revealed to Daniel because Daniel's head was going to roll. He prayed. He asked his father to show him this. He did. He went to the king, showed him. We know the rest of that story. But it was not Daniel's vision. It wasn't his own vision. The first vision he had was Daniel chapter 7. That was the first one. So it was after that one. It was after chapter 7. So this would be his second vision that he's recorded. And so he has after which appeared to me the first time. But it's after not only in time, but after in kind. In other words, it's like the first one. We can't miss that. It's kind of like a second witness to Daniel chapter 7. We're going to see that. That's going to open up pretty clearly here. And I saw in the vision that it came to pass that when I saw, I was by the Shushan in the palace. I was at Shushan in the palace. So this is where he lived, which is in the province of Elam. I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Eli. So in the vision, he was transported. He was taken from this place, taken over to another place in vision. Now, our Father doesn't do anything unless there's a reason, and there's a specific reason which we're going to see, why he was airlifted and moved over here. Then I lifted my eyes and I saw, behold, there stood before the river a ram. It had 2 horns, and 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. Now, we're not going to get into those details, but those details are very important because it's going to help us to understand the interpretation. So he sees it. He sees a ram, a body, and then he says 2 horns. 2 horns were high. The higher one came up last. And then we're going to keep going here. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, southward. Again, every detail is important. Which direction does he push first? West. Then he's going north. So when the west is taken care of, then we're going to push north. Then it says, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. He did according to his will and became great. Suddenly, a male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching ground. Now let me ask you, when does Yeshua say that this vision happens? At the end. We went back to Daniel and we found out that this vision begins at the end. Within Daniel chapter 8, 3 times, this is in the future. This is at the end. So we're seeing a vision that starts with a war that is for the end. It's the first event. We can know the very first event that sends us into this protracted time of the end is a war. It's not just any old war. It's not the First World War. It's not the Second World War. It's not the Korean War. It's not the Vietnam War. It's the war that we will think will bring an end to all wars. It's the war in the time of the end that is fought between the Western powers and Islam. Now, has anyone been watching the news lately? Yes, I know you have. Is it possible that we are facing a war between the West and Islam? Give it a little more time. Would you say yes?
Yes.
Certainly, we can see the possibilities here. At no time in history, at no time during the time of Alexander the Great, did a power come from the West across the surface of the whole earth. Now, us living at the time of the end, we know how big the earth is, and we can see that if we're going to take this as an isolated thing and apply this prophecy in the past, it doesn't actually meet every specification. Especially for us with 2020 hindsight, we can see that that couldn't possibly be a fulfillment of this vision. Was it an application of the vision? Yes, for those that have studied this in the past and have applied this to history, it has application, but certainly not fulfillment. Daniel 8 verse 6, we're just keeping reading here. Then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which he had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. So we see this goat power. Let's just go back here. We see this goat power comes from the west, and he runs at this ram with fury and power. Furious power. So what would you think, and I ask this question, and it kind of gets a chuckle, but if somebody ran at you with furious power, there's 2 things that could be wrong. Is this person could have just lost their mind for whatever reason. Or there's another possibility. What would happen if somebody ran at you with furious power? There's likely something that has happened. You have drawn the ire of someone, right? When we look at what's going on in the Islamic world, they are setting themselves up for this event. They're absolutely setting themselves up for this event. And we saw a little preview a few weeks ago when the United States took in went over there and took out somebody that was a high-ranking officer and just took him out just like that because they just wanted to teach them a lesson. But that's not being mad at all. When this actually happens, they will let loose. They will let loose. I understand, and there may be some service members here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that in the Gulf War in the 90s and so on, the Second Gulf War, that they actually had the big guns within the Persian Gulf. Does anyone know that? That's the nuclear weapons. They were actually geared up if they had to use those, because if you go and invade a Muslim country, according to the Quran, all the other Muslims, if an infidel country comes in and invades, all the other Muslims are supposed to come to the aid of the Islamic powers. That's what it says. That's in the Quran. And they were concerned, the people of the West were concerned, and so they wanted to make sure that everyone knew they were ready for whatever they threw at them. And of course, nothing ever happened. And that's good. And I saw him, the goat, confronting the ram, and the goat was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, broke its two horns, and these are, we're going to find out, it says in the prophecies, that these are the kings of Media and Persia. So the two horns are the controlling force, and we're going to see this in prophecy. That's how prophecy interprets itself. This is not me making this up. We're going to see that. So the ram has two horns that are calling the shots, and they are the kings of Media and Persia. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him. This is Islam now. This is the ram. And there was no one that could deliver the ram or Islam from his hand. So we can see here, this war that's coming is not going to be fought just over there. Because when this happens, it's going to be fought everywhere. It's going to be fought everywhere that there is a Trojan horse. Everywhere. That could be your neighborhood, depending on where you live. No power, no one could. So that tells me that maybe somebody tries. Somebody like maybe North Korea. You know, some of these allies that are kind of okay with Islam right now because they have the same common enemy. That's how wars are fought, same common enemy. We can look back in the Second World War, see Japan and Hitler. Not two likely people that would come together, but they had the same common enemy, and they were willing to team up. But this says nobody's going to deliver this from this goat's hand. Therefore, the male goat grew very great, but when he became the large horn, which I submit, the large horn, the most powerful nation, is going to lead the way on this charge, and it can be none other than the United States. So this large horn is the United States, and it says it's going to be broken. It will be broken. And in place of it, 4 notable horns come up from the 4 winds of heaven. So there will be 4 powers that come up and take in the vacuum. Because if the United States breaks, let's just say if the economy broke in the United States, what would other world powers do? What do you suppose they would do? What would China do? What would Russia do? What would the European Union do? These are questions that are actually real questions. If the United States is broken, not only financially, but militarily, not only militarily, there's famines, there's pestilence, there's natural disasters. There's going to be things happening that we're going to be wondering what we're going to be putting into our mouths. This is another reason why we need to be prepared for this time, because it will not be business as usual. This is not to scare anyone. This is to help people get moving in a direction where they will not have to depend on Uncle Sam for their sustenance. Going to be very, very important in the near future. Daniel 8:22, it says, "For as the broken horn and the 4 that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall rise out of that nation," out of that goat power, but not with its power. In other words, the greatest nation, when it falls, that the nations will come up and try and fill the vacuum that the United States left. But apparently, according to Scripture, none of these nations will be able to fill that vacuum. If we examine things that are out there in the world, in the real world, see how the structures of the kingdoms are made up, we can see this actually playing out quite easily. We know that on the UN has 5 permanent members. Now, these 5 permanent members came out of the alliance between England, France, Russia, China, and the United States. How could I forget that? 5 permanent members. So they set up the United Nations, and they were the kings. That's wonderful. So in the United Nations, there's 5 nations that actually control everything pretty much that goes on. If there's resolutions that come in, they can veto it. They can say, no, this is not going to happen. There's other countries in the world that are not too happy about that. There's a lot of Muslim countries that are not happy about that. Germany's not happy about that. And so on. So there's other countries that have risen to power that says, hey, it shouldn't be all about you guys all the time. That's the structure of the UN. Now, if we look at this, the way the prophecy reads, it says that there's a notable horn and there's 4 horns, and it tells us that these are 4 other kingdoms. So we've got 5 kingdoms. We just so happen in the UN structure, we have 5 permanent members, 5 players that control the whole thing. Now, if we take that and we take away one of the notable horns, if that's the United States, how many do we have left? That's how simple it is. It's simple math. We can see this thing. We just compare the prophecies with what we can see out on the world. And we can see this thing happening very clearly. I rather suspect that France will either be the representative of the European Union, or the European Union as a bloc will fill that at the end. And that's just about what it looks like, because it says, it goes on to say in verse 9, it says, out of one of them, in other words, out of one of these 4 kingdoms, it says, came a little horn, or kingdom, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, toward the glorious land. Again, these directions are important. We're going to get into that, but we're going to look at this. So, we see now that Daniel chapter 8 has a war. We followed the narrative through until 1 horn was broken, and then 4 horns came up in its place. I'm hoping I haven't lost anyone up until now. Is this making? I'm just following verse by verse to see this thing get played out. So now we're going to go back to something in Daniel chapter 7 and look at this again. You remember how he said, after the one that appeared to me the first time? So now we're going to go have a look at that vision, just a snippet of that vision to see what it says. It says Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts. I'm suggesting that the 4 beasts take off exactly the same place as the 4 horns. So Daniel was shown in Daniel chapter 8, he was shown a prelude to where we have the division of the 4 horns, and this is where Daniel chapter 7 takes off from there. Is that making any sense? Okay, stay with me here. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions upon his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream telling the main facts. Here again, we've just got the main facts. We're going to have to get facts from somewhere else if we're going to put this together. Goes on to say, Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven stirring up the great sea. We don't know what the great sea is here, but when we go into Revelation, which we're going to get there, but when we go into Revelation, we can see that the great sea is multitudes and nations. This is what it is. So we've got 4 winds stirring up the great sea. Do you remember in chapter 7 of Revelation, we have 4 winds again? Do not let the 4 winds, saw 4 angels holding the 4 winds. Do not let the 4 winds go. This is at the time when the 4 winds are striving upon the multitudes. Daniel chapter 7 verse 3 goes on to say, and the 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. And there was another horn, a little one. So this is what I'm saying, is this piggybacks on Daniel chapter 8, where we saw a large horn broken, 4 come up, and a little horn follows. Here we see 4 come up, and a little horn follows. This is what I'm trying to suggest is we need to put this on top of Daniel chapter 8 now. But we do not see the war, the prelude in the kings of Media and Persia against the West. Goes on to say that those beasts which are four kings that arise out of the earth. We don't need to guess what they are. We know what they are by their prophetic interpretation that Daniel was given. Okay. Stay with me here. Daniel chapter 2. Who's familiar with that chapter? Daniel chapter 2. We saw this head of gold. It starts out with it's all gold. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't like the idea that after him would come another kingdom and then another kingdom. So he made a statue of it entirely of gold. He wanted his kingdom to last forever. But this prophecy tells us something very interesting. It says that you are the head of gold. That's what Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar. You're the head of gold, and after you shall arise another kingdom. That other kingdom is Medo-Persia. And we can see this in history, that the Medo-Persian Empire came after Babylon. They're the ones that conquered Babylon, actually when Daniel was still in Babylon. It was King Cyrus and Darius that conquered Babylon. We can see that Greece followed Medo-Persia and also Rome, and then it turned into Papal Rome, the Holy Roman Empire. We know that. And then it goes into division. It talks about, goes down to the 10 kings or the 10 toes, and it's actually talking about the feet kingdom. So what is this statue? This statue is actually, when we break it down, this is a revelation of all the one world orders. That's what it is. Babylon ruled the then known world. Medo-Persia ruled. Rome then ruled. Or Greece, and then Rome. And then at the end, he's told that they shall not cleave one to another. There will be a last attempt for a new world order. You guys are aware of that, right? So in the prophecies, we should be able to find that very well. So now we go up to Daniel chapter 7. And remember that Daniel chapter 7 was not a dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. It was a dream that Daniel had. Now this is really important. The name Daniel means God is my judge, or God will judge. That's what it means. Elohim will judge. So Daniel's book primarily focuses on judgment, and we can see this. It will be in the time of the 10 kings where judgment is made, and we see that in Daniel chapter 2, which a stone comes out and lands on the feet at that time period. In Daniel chapter 7, we see a lion with eagle's wings. We see a bear comes on the scene. We see a leopard with 4 wings. And we see a dreadful beast that has 10 horns. It loses 3 horns, only ends up with 7 at the end. Now, this prophecy also, like Daniel 8, has been applied in history. And let me share how it's been applied. It's been applied that the lion represents Babylon. The kings of Media and Persia are represented by the bear. And the leopard is represented by the Grecian Empire. And the iron and teeth, the dreadful beast, is represented by Rome and then Papal Rome that followed. Now that fits pretty good, but when we actually start taking this apart, which we're not going to do, I just want us to get over this hump, because I know there's a lot of people, oh no, that's all fulfilled. Yes, I agree that it has had an application, but not an actual fulfillment. That's when every specification in a prophecy is fulfilled. So what are we actually looking at? I'm suggesting that if we just went down to the toes, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the dreadful beast are an expansion of the 10 kings in the toes. That's what we're looking at. This actually makes a lot of sense because we have one kingdom in a lion. Ultimately, we're going to see that. We're going to have one kingdom there. We're going to have a kingdom in the bear. We're also going to have a kingdom in the leopard. But in the last kingdom, we've got 10 kings that make this kingdom up. 3 are uprooted. So how many are we left with? 7. At the end, we're going to see this in Revelation chapter 17. We have 10 kings at the end of time that are going to make war against the Lamb. End of days, 10 kings. Any prophecy that demonstrates that we only have 7, and that's what the historical application says, any of you that studied this, they say that the Roman Empire broke into 10 divisions. And it says 3 were uprooted to make way for the 4th, that little horn. So how many do we have? 7. 10 minus 3 equals 7. The historical application does not work. But if we do the math right, we can see 1 in the lion, we can see 1 in the bear, 1 in the dreadful beast, and also, 1 in the lion, 1 in the bear, 1 in the leopard, and 7 left over in the dreadful beast. Now you tell me what 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 7 equals. That's 10. That's why if we actually look at what the prophecy is saying, we can see that the historical application doesn't quite fit. Does it look good? Absolutely it looks good. And it worked for a long time, but in the time of the end, we need all the information. Daniel told King Nebuchadnezzar, he has shown the king, Nebuchadnezzar, what will be in the latter days. That's what it says in Daniel chapter 2. That's when the kingdoms of the 10 toes are made. That was a revelation of the latter days. So what I'm suggesting is that Daniel chapter 7 is a latter-day prophecy, technically a latter-day prophecy. Daniel 8 is a latter-day prophecy, just what it says in Daniel 8, just what Yeshua said, just what Daniel 10 through 12 said, latter-day prophecy, shut up the book, seal it until the time of the end. This is what we're looking at. Now, interesting, in the first beast that comes up in Daniel 7, it says the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till the wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth, made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Lion with the eagle's wings. There's a power lion with the eagle's wings. I don't think there's any coincidence at all that 2 of the major powers in the world today that could fit into this category, the number 1 beast that is forming right now is an alliance between Great Britain and the United States. This has happened right before our very eyes. When you're watching the news, just listen to what Great Britain and the United States are doing together. We know they've been allied in the past, even when they were in the European Union, but now they are out of the European Union. I would like to suggest that the UK needs the United States more than they ever have in history. Would you agree to that? I would also like to say is that the United States needs Great Britain more than it ever has in the past. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but the United States is all by themselves on this world platform. Do you guys understand that? They are on their own. Canada's kind of like, who are we going with here? And Australia and New Zealand, they're kind of teetering a little bit. They need the UK. They need them really bad. And why do they need them really bad? Because the UK and the United States, also Canada for the most part, Australia and New Zealand have the same roots. It's called Christian and Judeo roots. And that is what's binding these. They have the same values, basically the same values, and that's what's pulling them out. One thing they don't want to keep forking over money to the EU, tons and tons of money, billions of dollars every year, and they want to seal their borders. Now, your United States government does not want to be a part of the New World Order. Do you believe that? Absolutely. They do not. They are doing everything they can to remain sovereign. They want to be their own boss, and they want to control their borders. This is the same thing. The exit from the European Union is on these 2 principles. I want to control my borders, and I want to remain sovereign. That means I can say where I'm going to put my money. It's the same thing. They have the same values, and that's what's bringing them together. I believe that the first beast that comes out of the sea that Daniel saw was a combination of an eagle and a lion. And the eagle is what makes the lion fly, which is the truth. The United States elevates the lion. The eagle will elevate the lion. So what I've been telling people for a number of years now, the UK has to pull out of the EU. And I've had people, oh no, that'll never happen. Just wait. If these prophecies are true, just like it says in Habakkuk, write the vision, make it plain, so that he may run who reads it. It'll surely come, even though it tarries. That's what we're told. That's what visions do. They tarry. I believe that it was impossible for these prophecies to break open if the United States didn't actually pull the UK out. And if we saw the things that were going behind the scenes and read some of the things that are out there, the United States has been drawing the UK out, because there's no way the UK would pull out of the EU if it did not have Big Brother to lean on. That's just the facts. That's just the facts. So we're going to see a very close alliance here. And this is what I'm telling people to watch. Just watch how tight this gets, how much they're working together in economics and military and everything. It goes on to say in Daniel 7:17, those great beasts which are four kingdoms that arise out of the earth. And I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them. So the prophecy of the lion, the eagle's wings are what? Plucked off? They're taken off. This is represented in Daniel 8 as the little, or this large horn, this notable horn that leads the charge against Islam. It says in Daniel, it's broken off. In Daniel 7, it's plucked off. So the lion is left there by itself. And it goes on to say here that then I was considering the horns, and there was another horn. Same division as we saw in Daniel chapter 8, where the four horns, now the little horn comes on right after that. So we have an identical parallel after the war. The ram is lamb with two horns. It says in the prophecy itself that these horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. It doesn't tell us how many kings. We just know there's kings of Media and Persia. Daniel 8, verse 20. If we were to take an ancient map of the kings of Media and Persia when they went to their greatness of their kingdom, when they replaced Babylon, they actually expanded that kingdom. And they went out all the way to Turkey on the west, and they went all the way east to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and so on. It encompassed the southern Russian republics. That's why most of those are Islamic. And it went all the way down into Libya, all the way across to Libya to the west from Afghanistan, Persian Gulf. All that was included in that. And Saudi Arabia, you'll see at the bottom here, it kind of goes up out of Saudi Arabia. That's because it was all sand there. Now with Saudi Arabia and able to desalinize the water, then they can live in a lot of these places now. They can make an oasis in the desert. So here we see, when we're talking about the time of the end, what could it possibly mean by the kings of Media and Persia? I just drew this. I just took a map. And I followed the lines on the Persian Empire, and you'll never guess what. It's all the Islamic countries in the Middle East. Could it be that Daniel was not told that it would be Iran and Iraq and Syria and Turkey and all of this stuff, because they didn't exist? But he's just said that it's the kings of Media and Persia. So us here down at the end, they're trying to make sense out of this. We grab a history book and we go diving and we find, wow, the kings of Media and Persia. You want to spin and pin the tail on the donkey in a hot spot on this planet, and you're going to find that the hot spots are the Muslim nations. That's where the hot spots are, and we can see this in the world today. We see a line drawn around these nations. And we can see clearly that these are the Islamic nations with poor little Israel right down in the middle of the mess. And what are we told? When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, we take that and we say, well, that was 70 AD. Well, you know what? Jerusalem is surrounded by armies today, again. Same thing. We're going to see it this time only on a bigger, much larger scale. So we can see the center of this is bullseye. And we can see down in the Straits of Hormuz, that's where 1/5 of the oil supply every day goes through. Iran has already said, you touch us, you do anything radical, and we'll shut the strait off. Could they do it and succeed? No. But people that go and do suicide bombings, they're not really concerned whether they're going to survive through whatever they're going to do, because they are doing it all for Allah. Here again, this is not about people. It's about ideologies. That's what we're talking about here. So we see Jerusalem there right in the middle of the countries and so on. When you see this happening, Yeshua said. Now let's look at the second part of the vision that is a little tricky. We can get lost if we can't get the kings of Media and Persia and do that. We should be able to make some sense out of Greece. So it says the male goat that we're talking about, that has this notable horn that's broken, and then 4 notable ones come up, and then a little horn comes out of one of them. That's what we're trying to make sense of. So the male goat, it says, is the kingdom of Greece, or properly Grecia as well. So let's look at this, shall we? We see, if we're looking at this to be an end-time prophecy, we've got to make sense out of this. Grecia is the little country, Greece, the little country with the circle, and then the smaller one is Cyprus. We should know that there are U.S. and U.K. bases on Cyprus, and there are also in Greece. Now that should mean something. So that tells us if there's a war between Islam and the West, that Greece will play center stage. And here's how it'll play center stage. Any of you that have been in the forces or know anyone, whenever there's a war anywhere, they try to get as close as possible so that they can stage the war from a location. Well, they pick the closest spot to where they have to get to, and they will stage from there. It's very reasonable to conclude that you will not be able to dock a boat anywhere near Greece. You will not find an airport that's open other than military equipment. Very, very likely. If the West is going to square off against Islam, Greece will be in center stage of this war. On another count where it's possible is Greece is known as where the West starts. That's just the way they term it. It's the West. Everything Greece and further is the West. It's been known as the West. Our system of government all started from there, and we grew from there. It's the system of the West. So in the prophecies, a power from the West comes across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and so on. So this power will end up in this country for sure. Greece will be center stage, and so on. So symbolically and literally, Greece will be involved. Daniel chapter 8, verse 2, it says, I was by the river Ulai. That's the Karun River. Southern Iran flows into the Persian Gulf. And then the other river is Daniel 10, verse 4. It says that Daniel was by the river, the great river, the Tigris or the Hiddekel. Where are those two rivers? They mark the bullseye. So instead of a GPS, which we have in our cars today, we can have street numbers and so on. In the prophecies, in the divine wisdom, he gave us two rivers that intersect. And when we see this, when we examine that, we can see very close that this is actually center stage. When we look at all the kings of Media and Persia, this is right in the middle. We also have a hot spot in Iran, in Iraq right now. The United States, we're just going to go into some things that are going on now just to be aware of. Iran, everyone knows what's going on in Iran. At least they think they do. And Iraq, the other thing is when Senior Bush went in and Junior Bush went in, they both went into Iraq. They destabilized the whole region by taking out Saddam Hussein. And now they have a real problem. It's a huge problem because 2/3 of the population are Shia Muslim, which is closer allied to Iran. So instead of taking care of a problem, they have a greater problem than they've ever had right now, and that's what we're hearing in the news. But I can guarantee you, if you are listening to only American news, you are being fed the narrative of the Western nations. And do you believe everything that's on CNN? How about Fox? Yeah. No, you know you're not getting all the goods. And so you want to start listening to some other news places. One place that I like to listen to is Al Jazeera. It's very interesting news. But you get it from an Islamic perspective. But it's actually a very good news place, and you're getting it kind of how they see it, which is pretty important for us to look at the other side as well. Tells us in Daniel 11. So now we're going to use a little bit of Daniel 11. It says 3 more kings will arise in Persia. So in the realm of the kings of Media and Persia, 3 more kings will arise in Persia. A 4th will be far richer than them all by his strength, it tells us. And through his riches, he will stir up all against the realm of Greece. So evidently in Daniel 8, where it says the kings of Media and Persia, Daniel 11 gives us a little more information. And it says there are other kingdoms in this empire of kings of Media and Persia. And they will stir all against. So when the 4th kingdom comes and joins the forces with Islam as a whole, we can expect the attack on the West. Where did I say it went first? Where did the prophecy say it went first? Everyone remember? It says this ram went one direction, then it went another direction, and then it went another direction. The first direction was west. That's what it does. It goes west, and that's where the ram is pushing. Once we see this one kingdom in Persia that's far richer and greater than all, when he goes on board with the rest of Islam, everything's going to change. Turkey now is more aligning themselves with Iran and other countries. The president of Turkey has actually just done a whirlwind tour of Europe, and he's gone down to Malaysia. He's visiting Pakistan. He was just in Pakistan and making his alliances with Pakistan. Pakistan is a nation to watch. Why is Pakistan a key player in all of this? Because they're so rich? They're actually very poor, which is a danger. Now, they're a very poor country, but they're very rich in something else. What is it? They have nuclear weapons. They have nuclear weapons. So if someone's very poor, they become very vulnerable. You understand what's going on here? Turkey is now aligning itself. Saudi Arabia is trying to align itself with Pakistan. And the West is a little nervous of what's going on. This is in the news, daily news, what's happening right now. Syria, of course, we know what's been going on in Syria in a civil war. But once Syria comes out of this thing, I rather suspect they will be aligning themselves with the kings of Media and Persia quite well. And Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia must be this 4th king that's far richer and greater than them all. If we understood what not only the United States, but Great Britain, France, Germany, Canada, Russia, China, if we understood what the equipment, the military equipment that Saudi Arabia has purchased, we would shudder. We would absolutely shudder. It's unbelievable what they have purchased. And all the Arab nations as far as that goes. So let's close this up, shall we? What are we watching for? What and who are we watching? We're watching these 3 guys. This is Osama bin Salman, sorry. Yeah, you get those 2 mixed up, don't we? Mohammed bin Salman. Thank you. On the right, or he's on your left, sorry. He's on your left, and he is arguably could be the most powerful man in the world right now because of this. Money and black gold. He's got lots of it. He's got lots of military equipment. He's one to watch. He's allied himself with the United States, also with Israel. This is Jared Kushner. You guys are probably familiar with who these are. And these are the people that have been instrumental in putting together the peace deal for the Palestinians. That's who's been at the forefront of this, these three. But the Palestinians and the rest of the Arab world are furious about this peace plan. They don't like it. They're not happy with it at all. In fact, they think that Mohammed bin Salman has stabbed the Islamic world in the back. Let me just give you one reason why they think so. True Islam is they contribute a lot to the poor, and it's actually, there's some good fundamental principles in true Islam. I'm not saying it's all good, but there are some fundamental principles in that if you see your brother suffering, you help him. That's just the way it is. The Islamic world is very poor. A lot of countries are very poor, and they're starting to get a little upset with Saudi Arabia because they're living pretty wealthily. It's a little over the top. In fact, this is just one thing. Mohammed bin Salman purchased a $500 million yacht. Now, this would be okay if the money didn't belong to the Saudi Arabian people, but it actually does. It's all from oil, everything that came out of the country. But they're living like this. His next thing he wants to purchase is Manchester United, the soccer team. Does anyone follow soccer? Yeah, that's just like these games they play are out of this world. But the Islamic world is seeing this as a betrayal as the Muslim cause, among other reasons as well. Jerusalem Post, February 15, 2020. When was that? Somebody tell me when that is?
Today.
Okay. The Grand Mufti bans Palestinians from supporting the peace plan, and he said that the Palestinian Authority has agreed that any Palestinian who cooperates with the United States President Donald Trump peace plans for the Middle East is betraying Allah, and that they deserve to be cursed by Allah, His angels, and all people. This is what they say. This is what they believe. And this is really what's important. So they have totally rejected this, and this is what they're talking about. And this just isn't one guy. This is across the Arab world. They are not happy about this. This is the Ayatollah Khomeini from Iran. He sings the same story. Now I want you to see the guy that's directly behind him. That is Qasem Soleimani that was taken out. But you want to look at the scarves they're wearing. You see those scarves? Do you recognize that scarf? You remember a guy named Yasser Arafat? He was the one that wore that scarf all the time. You'd see that. That scarf is symbolic of the Palestinian cause. And these people are wearing it. They're all over the Islamic world. It's about the Palestinian cause, and they're uniting around that because they have a common enemy. If their common enemy is the United States, and an Islamic country, a very well represented Islamic country that holds the two most holiest sites in Islam, if they are now allying themselves with your enemy, what does that say about your friend that you thought was your friend? He actually becomes your enemy because he's allied with your enemy. This is what we have shaping in the Muslim world. This is what we're looking at, is an upset of the apple cart in the Muslim world. The most powerful nation in the Muslim world is, bar none, Saudi Arabia. If they flip, how would they flip? They could flip the same way that Iran in 1979 did. They changed, as it were, overnight, and they went radical. So they could do that just the same way Iran did, or they could just surrender, is what they're going to have to do to the Islamic world. This is the president of Turkey. This is another man. This is the forefront, who we've already talked about. And he is going around. They had last March, there was a new Middle East alliance, and it shook the world. We didn't really hear about that because we weren't really cognizant of it. But the main world powers, they were shaken, because what it is it's pulling the Islamic nations together. And we're okay as long as Islam is all fighting and they're all separated. But you unite Islam, and now we have a problem. We'll just jot down near the bottom of that who's part of this. The leading members are a new bloc, the new bloc. Important. Turkey, Iran, Qatar, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. Now, if you put those on a map, you're going to see that Saudi Arabia is being surrounded. This is what they're doing. This is what the other Islamic nations are trying to do. They're trying to cave in Saudi Arabia by surrounding them. Goes on to hear Al Jazeera presenter, Turkey is much closer to the Arab peoples today than Saudi Arabia. So what it is right now is they're trying to win the favor of the Islamic people. And Turkey now is making moves to demonstrate that Saudi Arabia is not worthy to be called a representative in the Islamic world. And it's because of these issues that are happening in Saudi Arabia. Goes down and tells just about halfway through, this great battle between Saudi Arabia and Turkey is the significant turning point and the main factor that will determine the future of the entire region and the entire Muslim world. These are things that are huge milestones in making these prophecies come to fruition. This is an attempt by those same Islamic states, Turkey, Iran, Qatar, Malaysia, to stand against the East-West Pact, apparently the pact between the Gulf states, that's primarily the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and the United States, against the Muslim interests. We are grateful to them. So these are Muslim powers. They're grateful to Turkey, Iran, Qatar, and so on, to go against the West and Saudi Arabia because they're allied against the West. There was a summit in Malaysia in 2019, right in the December, right at the end of the year. Qatar, Turkey, Malaysia, Iran, and they were challenging Saudi Arabia's standing in the Muslim world. This is just to demonstrate this what's going on. Saudi Arabia is coming under tremendous pressure from the Islamic world. Won't take time to read all of this. We'll read that last paragraph. The summit was regarded to show the power, or a show of power by its Saudi Arabia's main rivals. One rival being Turkey, Qatar, and Iran, who support the Muslim Brotherhood and terror organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. And these are from Lebanon, and the Hezbollah and Hamas are from the Palestinian support. And as an attempt to challenge the status in the Muslim world and Muslim world of Saudi Arabia, which had been invited but declined to attend. Saudi Arabia was invited to this summit, but they declined because they knew that they were going to have to take a backstage. It's kind of like a party, but you're not going to be the center of the party, so you're not going to go. And that's exactly what they did. Here, this is February 9, 2020, February 13, 2020 again. Hezbollah senior official, he's talking about this Iranian thing that happened a while back. He says, our answer to the deal, to Trump's deal of the century is jihad until Jerusalem and Palestine are liberated. That's what they're saying right now. They haven't changed their tune. In fact, this has infuriated, this has just raised the temperature of the water up a little bit more. So the Iran Revolutionary Guard Commander-in-Chief, so this is the new one that took the place of Soleimani, he warns Israeli, take a good look at the Mediterranean Sea. That's where you're going to end up. Nothing's changed in Iran. Everything's the same. They're just upping it. So here we see the kings of Media and Persia, they're pushing on the West. This is what we can expect, and this is what's going on. This is the next major prophetic event with the United States, Great Britain teaming up, becoming stronger, a stronger force for the West. They will take this on and do what they need to do. Here's another face. You're probably familiar with this face. This is another man to watch. Don't forget. that he's playing into this as well. I find it very interesting that world leaders, when they're making a trip from Washington to somewhere else in the world or somewhere in Europe, they usually stop at Rome. I wonder why. Yeah. And he's heading up the global cause for global warming. You guys are aware of that? He's the center on this global warming. As if man can save the planet. My goodness. Ram versus Islam. That's what we're looking at now. A ram versus Islam equals Islam. And the male goat is the UN, and that's because it's a conglomeration of members, states, these 5 member states being the controlling powers. I want to leave a few thoughts here today before we go. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. As Noah built an ark for the coming storm, we need to be preparing for our arks for the coming storm. Noah was told to bring all the food into the ark. It could have been provided for him, but he was told. And this demonstrated, we see this in Hebrews chapter 11. What he did by his works demonstrated his faith. Tells us there, Yeshua tells us, and they did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. There's 2 phases of preparation that we need to make. Anyone want to guess what the first one is? Spiritual preparation. If we were to die when we walked out of this place, we need to understand that we are in a saving relationship with our Messiah. Absolutely. Number 1. But we also need to make some physical preparation because Yeshua said, you will know that I'm coming soon by the signs. There are things I would rather guess that even maybe some people here, if they knew that Yeshua was coming tomorrow or next week or next month, that you might change something. I can think of a few things that I might change. And if I was one of those guys that had, $1 billion in the bank and owned places all over the place, do you think Yeshua is coming back to get the bank account and to get the deeds of the property? No. No. What we need to do, I believe, doesn't matter where you are in life. We need to get to the place where everything we own is on the altar. Does that make sense? When it's called to sacrifice for his cause, we need to let it go. That's why we all need to pray when it's time. What do we do with this? What do we do with that? Friends, it's time to make that commitment that we've never made before and that we're going all the way. And that commitment is renewed every day. Every day, if we renew that commitment, he will tell you where you need to be at the time. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for your goodness, and we thank you for your word that is sure. And we thank you as we are studying these things at the time of the end that you kept them secret for us because they were going to have a purpose. Then we would know. We would know that the time has come. The time is very near, knocking at the doors. We ask that you be with each one of us. Help us to make sense of this, what it means to us as individuals, what it means for our families. And Father, show us how to walk, to represent your kingdom, that your will be done in our lives as it is in heaven. We thank you in Yeshua's name. Amen. Amen. Thank you. And if there's anyone that would just like to ask a question, I'd be willing to stay alone. And unless you got everything and it made perfect sense, that's good. Yes, we do have a microphone. I don't know. It's not working? Is it on? Is the button on far left sides? The only thing is we won't pick it up on it. I'd like to get the questions on if we can. Okay, no, I'm not. So have you got the little box for the cordless on? It's right in the corner there. There's on the far right side of about 10 inches long, a couple of antennas, far right side, there's a button. No, it doesn't work. Okay, that's fine.
Now do you hear me?
There you go.
Ah,
You got it. Okay, perfect. So now everyone can hear. And even those people out in internet land will be able to.
Hello, internet land. Okay, so if I followed everything right, the big horn that gets broken off and the wings clipped are both the United States.
Yes, the eagle and the large horn represents, because they are the ones that the large horn leads the charge against the kings of Media and Persia. And we can see clearly that's who it would be. Now this is making application of a prophecy. So first of all, we got to see if we're justified in making that application, which we tried to do. And it would have to be the United States. There's no one else that would fit this. Yes.
And that would certainly allow for the one world everything to form, having American patriots and pride out of the way. Does the scriptures give any indication of time frame between when that happens and the abomination of desolation?
Wow.
Because that could be a long
haul. Oh, that could be a couple hundred years. Yeah. Okay. We got the question. Great, excellent question. How long? You know, you just asked the question that Daniel asked, that John asked, that how long? It's that same old question. It was hidden from those people. But I don't think it's hidden from those at the end, because he wants us to know how long. That's why he's given us 1,260 days. He's given us a 1,290-day period. He's given us a 1,335 and a times and a half. In the book of Revelation, there's two other time periods. There's a 10-day time period and there's a 5-month time period that's mentioned twice in Revelation chapter 12. All these put together are about the time of the end. When does it start? It seems to revolve around the daily being taken away. So if we can figure out what the daily is, if we can figure out what that is, that long-kept secret, if we can figure out what the daily is, when we can see the daily taking shape in the world, that's going to give us an indication of how long. Now, I think I've got the daily figured out. We're not going to get, that's a whole nother night, so we can't get into that. And I'm not trying to, cliffhanger or anything. It's just you've got to hear the whole presentation. My personal opinion, and I think that's what you might be asking, my personal opinion, we're not very far from that event, the daily. I would not put the second coming of our Messiah outside of 10 years. No way. That's where I'm at. Now, the biggest part of that is, that sounds like, well, we got lots of time. No. There's going to be times of trouble through that when it'll be hard. Travel will be hard. You won't be able to fill up your gas tank. You won't be able to do this. You won't be able to do that. You won't be able to buy seeds. You won't be able to plant. You won't be able to do a lot of things. So that's really the most important thing in my mind, is knowing that that time is very close. That will happen when the war happens. We are very close to that war. My thinking is easily in 2 years. Easily in 2 years. That means I got to have my act together within 2 years. I don't have any time to waste. And that actually makes really good sense, because if you should have told Daniel, seal up the vision until the time of the end, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge will increase. It's not until the time of the end that the understanding of these visions would come, and because God's timing knows no haste and delay, he has not told us early. He's told us when we need to know. So I think soon. Second coming, maybe 10 years, maybe less. Probably less. We know we got 3.5 plus in the 1,200 or the 1,335 days. That's about 3+ years. And there will be a ramp up between that. I rather suspect that could be a 3-year period. It could be less than that. We're facing that right now. Yeah. Is that answer that pretty good?
It does. Just thinking of how I kind of think the United States is Mystery Babylon, and so when the horn is broken off, we will fall within an hour, and the world will weep because we'll no longer be buying their goods, which put everybody in a weakened state for the Antichrist to come on the scene to then take power. Everyone will be poorer and looking for answers. But then for the remnant, in this country and around the world, it's kind of like when you're fasting, you like to know when the end is so that you know how much longer you have to go. So if the remnant then now has made their preparations, right? The bighorn is now broken off. We are crippled, and now we're kind of relying on him. It's just thinking of the timetable. Well, then how long are we going to have to do that until, the end?
Right, how long? That's how long, yeah. And I think in understanding, as we go, the prophecies are going to get clearer and clearer. As we study these things, come together and study them, they're going to become clearer and clearer. And I think the fog is going to lift, even in the time period as well. Any other questions? Back there.
This is kind of a thematic question concerning the festival days and the metrics that Daniel gives us. In your timeline, and this might be skipping ahead a little bit, the 185 days between Atonement and Passover, you've got the 1260 and the 1290 and the 1300. Do you see in those time periods any allusions to Hanukkah and Purim?
Oh, great question. Hanukkah and Purim. There are, especially Purim, there's some interesting things that happened. There was a death decree that went out. So whether we can line it up with Purim or not, we see in Revelation there's a death decree that goes up. You can't buy or sell, and your head's going to be sought after. It says those were beheaded. So we can see some parallels. I see the Levitical feasts clearly in the prophecies. Not so much Hanukkah and Purim. There's some comparative things, but I don't see them clearly there. I'd love it if somebody could show them to me. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I could change. Yeah. Okay, great question. Excellent questions. Anybody else? We see one back there.
Have you taken a look at the at Jonathan Cahn's The Oracle? He talks about the Jubilees and how they tie in with the end times. It's pretty interesting. It's going in right exactly with what you're saying, but he literally looks at the different Jubilees that happen.
Yes. There's no question the whole calendar is going to be involved in this. Absolutely. The weeks, the sabbatical week, the Shemitah year, that's going to be involved, and the Jubilees, absolutely. No question. Yeah. Any other questions? And again, if you don't want to ask your question, we want to hear of it. And so there's a box out there that has paper in it. Just write it down. I'd love to be able to answer some of the unspoken questions, because I know we all have questions, but we don't always feel comfortable about standing up and asking them. You're not allowed to ask questions.
What is the
You always ask me hard questions.
What is the schedule for next week?
Oh,
And
good
what's the
one.
next topic you're going to
Good one. Okay. Next week, we can't be here next week. We're going up to Iowa to do some meetings up there. But we will be back next Sabbath after that, here, same place, same time. So that's 2 weeks. So we won't be back here for 2 weeks. So if you know of somebody that might be coming, just make sure they don't come next week. And we're going to go deeper into this stuff. Now we've broken through the surface, and we're going to go deep into Daniel, and we're going to be pulling in Revelation now as well. So we've set the stage. It's kind of hardcore here, and I'm going to do my best not to lose you. But I would like to suggest, if between now and then, if you read the whole book of Daniel, which is not very long, but if you could read the whole book of Daniel, and then that would be your next week thing. And then the week after that, read the whole book of Revelation, and you guys will be in really good shape. But if you don't have that much time, go through Daniel chapter 7, or Revelation 13, and Revelation 17. Those are going to be the core pieces we're going to put together next week.
Can you
And we'll
repeat
be-
those, please?
The whole book of Daniel, the whole book of Revelation. You got a week to read one, a week to read the next one. And then the core things that most everything will revolve around is Daniel chapter 7 and Revelation chapter 13. That's where we clearly see the New World Order formed, the mark of the beast, and so on. So that's going to be, that's really where the focus is going to be next week. Okay? Great. Thanks again for coming. Unless there's another question. Did I see someone want to ask another question? Okay, that's good. Thank you everyone again for coming, and do hope you come back. Praise God for His word. Okay, thank you.